Here's a quick demo of how to use Xactimate. First, we go to our desktop. We're going to log in. First thing we do, we're going to click on New Project. I always name it last name underscore city, where the customer we're doing the Xactimate for. The other thing I always do is just request a new price list. I request by zip code. That's the easiest way not to make a mistake. Contractor profile, download. You can get your tax jurisdiction by from the one-click code. We'll just use this one here. Then we start entering the data. I always expand my window. I don't care for our purposes the email address. This other information again for us isn't important. Next thing is come to estimator, and you can do a search of people that's been entered. And unfortunately with this version we're going to have to create a new one, so we would hit add. That'll just let that happen. Just tab past it. It'll set up its own. I don't know your address, Nate, but we'll just pick one here. You can go in and you won't be using your address. We set it up as if it's the customer doing it. You said Colorado Springs. I have no idea what they're... We can put in the phone number and the email. Really, the address for the estimator isn't important, but normally we would put this in. I don't remember it. I'm going to move past this. But normally if we have it, we'd put in the customer's name and email address. Here we do the insurance company if we have it. It's not essential. Let's say it's State Farm. I just start entering letters. If it's in there, it'll come up. If not, just like you did before, you have to add a new one. If you have to add one, you put in the name. And that's all I care about is the name and the quick code, okay? And in that case, type of loss, I have entered created wind hail, so I always use that. The file number is the claim number if the customer provides it. If you have a scope of loss, you can get it off the scope of loss. All right. Now the next thing we do is we go up here to parameters. If overhead and profit is involved or to be paid, either the customer asked for it or if it was on the scope of loss, we would put in 10 and 10 for O and P. Company name, again, we looked that up. We'll just use Authentics. And here this has already been set up, but you may have to set up for a new customer. Same operation as before. And then I'm going to have to add some, since this is, I'm going to try to export and import to get what I have on the other, our other license in here. Here we'll just pick that. Usually I have one called generic. That's what we would use. I'll get this set up here when I'm done. So we're done with this. We don't have a closing statement. Click estimate and then estimate items to get to the estimating screen. Okay. Up here, I click on this and I click add. So we're almost always going to be doing a roof. Let's say we were doing siding. We'd create front elevation, right elevation, rear elevation, and left elevation. If we were going to do gutters, oops, say I screw one up, I highlight it, I right click, I go down to edit. All right. If I want, let's say I want gutters and downspouts under the roof so that it, way it's grouped and printed, I drag that up there. When it's to the right, that means it's going to appear under the roof group and it'll be totaled under the roof group. Now this is important. I need to highlight, and I got congestion today. I need to highlight the item I'm going to estimate, and today we're just going to, maybe I'll do a quick one for siding. So we're going to estimate the roof. I come over here and I click on macros. All right. I've created 5 of the most often used macros: laminated, 3-tab, vinyl siding, fencing, and interior. So let's say we have a laminated roof. I can either come over here and click run, or I can just left double click on this. I'll do that. Oops. And I may have done it twice. Let me look. I did. So let's say you made a mistake and got it run twice. Click at the bottom, hold down the shift key, click here, and then hit delete. All right, we're good to go. Now we would take like an eagle view, and here that's where we would get these. It's easiest if you've got a macro to do it in this column. You can either put your data entry here, or you could put it up here. It's all the same. It's quicker to do it here. So let's say this roof has 34 squares, and for now we'll put in 34 for the roofing felt. If we have valleys, I have 3 times valley because that's how you calculate ice and water in square feet. It's 3 feet wide for an ice and water strip, so it's 3 feet times the length of the valley, which again we get from the eagle view. Let's say that's 78 feet, and that gives us 234 square feet of valleys. Now another thing, you've seen the notes. We went through this in the ones. You can check to see by highlighting that item, right click, and right here, go down to the bottom. Okay, let's do that again. We're good. This is important. Right click the second this item edit options, and click on line item attachments. You see here we have the code already entered in this macro for valleys, so you don't have to do anything. Okay, that's always going to be the case. Now we go, if we have an area where ice and water is required on the eaves, then you have 6 times 1. 6 is usually 2 3-foot layers, all right, times the eave length. And let's say that's 245 feet. All right, and if we don't need it, we would just delete it. Let's say we didn't need that item highlighted, right click and go up here and delete that item. Or you can use the delete key. All right, we're going to estimate with felt. In Symbility, every roof claim, they don't have an item for shingles with felt, so it's always without felt. That's a given. In Xactimate, it's estimated both ways. Some insurance companies do it without felt. State Farm, for example, still estimates with this item with felt. All right, you pick whichever one, and you usually do that by looking at the scope of loss and see what item they used, assuming you have a scope of loss. So in this case, we did put in felt, all right, and so we're going to go here and delete this, and I'm just going to hit the delete key. By the way, this is a little advanced, but you can see that we had ice and water in the valleys. So what the insurance companies do is they delete that from the felt. And I'll show you a simple calculation. There's 234 square feet, or 2.34 squares. So you divide by 100 basically, or you move your decimal place 2 places to the left. So we can end up with the same thing by, or calculate this by entering minus, parentheses, oh, we don't even need to do, I'm sorry, minus 2.34, and that will give us the amount of felt with the roof area, and then minus 31, and then minus the ice and water area. All right. At this point, don't worry about adding the waste. All right. Now, on the laminated shingles, usually from either the Restoration AI waste report or from Eagle View, we're going to come up with waste. So we know that the roof area is 34. If the waste is, say, 15.3%, we'll hit times, and we'll add 1 plus the percentage. So if it's 15.3, that would be 1.153. Let's say it's 8%. That would be 1.08. All right. So it's 34. The roof area, we know what that was. That's what the takeoff was. And then we take that and multiply times 1 plus the waste percentage. So that gives us the squares here. So here we calculate, here's what's going to end up printed. Hip and ridge, let's say this is a hip roof, and say we got 87 feet of hip and 64 feet of ridge. In some of the roof reports, it actually shows the cap total. If you want to use the waste report, that's a quick way. It has all those numbers in it. It has the cap total. Let's say the starter, and we put eaves plus rakes, which is the perimeter. So let's say the eaves are 221 and the rakes are 132. All right, that gives us the starter. You know what gable cornice returns are? Let's say we have 2 gable cornice returns. We don't have any gable cornice strips. I'm going to hold down the control key and hit both of them, and then I'm going to hit delete. We get into the steep and high charges, and again, that's the high. As you saw me do, you may have to look at the photos, and then you look at the Eagle View or the Hover or whatever report, and you go to the, let's pull one up here if I can find one real quick. So here's an Eagle View. I can tell that's at a higher elevation. I don't have this easily accessible, but I mean, I'm almost certain that these are 2-story and these right here are single story. So I would find the overhead. This one gives you individual measurements, which sometimes you have to use. This tells you the pitch, and then this one tells you gives you the area for each slope. For example, this slope here is 462, and it looks to me like this is all 2-story. Now, what I would do if I were doing this roof, I would take the total and I would subtract these 3. That's faster than adding these 5, okay, and it ends up with the same total. But that's how you come up with a high charge. And you saw me do, I would generally use Snagit, but I'm using it right now to record. But I would take clip this out, I would highlight the slopes that are high, and then I make something 2nd-story access charges. All right, so let's just say there were 18.634, and the remove and replace are the same. That was a low pitch roof, so I'm going to highlight that when you shift, go all the way down here, highlight them all at once, hit delete. And then we go through the vents, and that you can get from the scope of loss, but you should also look at the photos. The insurance misses stuff. Sometimes the photos are good enough to tell, sometimes they're not. Don't agonize over it, because if they don't provide good enough photos, that's on them. So let's say there was 4 turtle vents. There was 78 feet of ridge vent, and there was 2 exhaust caps. And then we don't have any of this other. I'm going to hit shift again, get rid of some of these. Now, furnace vents, I think you remember, but just for a quick review, this is a furnace vent. Sometimes they have different caps. All right, we look at the photos. If it's deteriorated, here I see corrosion, then code, because reinstallation materials item says that needs to be replaced. All right, so we replace this rain cap, we replace the tube, a double walled tube. This one looks to be 4 or 5 inches, and then we replace this flashing boot. Okay, so it's 3 items, and this is about 3 foot above the surface, but we don't cut that here. It's cut down here under the surface. So I add 3 feet for my calculations. So let's say that's a 5-inch double wall. All right, so I'm going to make that 6 foot. We've got 1 rain cap, and the storm collar. Let me pull that back up. Sometimes there's that collar that goes around here. If that is, we add the storm collar. If not, we just do what we would do here and do the rain cap. All right, so I'll get rid of this. And then we have the one flashing pipe jack. You'll hear me talk about reinstallation materials. It's automatically been entered here. All right, we go back to look. And here's the code item for reinstallation of materials. Now, by the way, if you had to enter a note, there are lots of notes that have already been entered. These are called F9 notes. So by clicking this stamp, not this one, but this one right here, you see the F9 notes that are available. So, I could pick any one of these. You should try to familiarize yourself. And let's say that I wanted to pick gutter screen for whatever reason. All right. Now, the other thing I can do, I can create my own note. So, all right, once I'm done, I don't save that. I just hit close. All right. And you'll see when we print how that comes out. So we got that. These vents, we don't need any. And here we got flashings. I usually add step and counter flashing, all right, or in-wall or sidewall in-wall flashing, all right, one with mill finish, one with color. It doesn't make a whole lot of difference. You see, there's not a ton of price difference, and a lot of times the insurance fights approving this, but let's just say there was 37 feet of that and 23 feet. And chimney flashings, here's your definition. Small is 24 by 24, average 32 by 36, and large 32 by 60. Let's say this had a large. I'm going to delete as I go down, so I keep things clean. Delete the large. Let's say, unlike Symbility, there's only two types of pipe jacks. Either it's a regular or it's a lead. So let's say this guy's got two lead pipe jacks. Say they are painted. All right, that adds $32 each. And again, we get that from looking at the photos. Drip edge is the rake plus the eaves length, which we did up here for starter. Easy enough to add. Oops, 353. That's code. And again, if you check, ooh, I didn't have it. Well, good. I forgot to put that in. So here's code drip edge. I click on it, hit OK, and it adds it. All right. So I need to fix that in the macro. And then we get to general conditions. I'm going to check to make sure I put this in. So I did the following items are direct cost, not indirect cost. All right. For depends on the house, how many stories, how much patio deck it needs to be protected. If there's a pool, if there's a lot of equipment, an air conditioner, on average, I'll put in anywhere from 200 to 300. I think about 200 and I go, that's 10 by 20. All right. So if I got a deck that's, 15 by 10, that's 150. That leaves me 50 to cover the air conditioner. I don't do a lot of close calculation for this. Let's just say this one we want 450. All right. General labor, this again, if we look here, says this one's for manually loading materials. All right. And this was a 34 square roof, 4 hours, probably about right. I could put in 6, and this one is for general cleanup with magnetic rakes and by hand. And then this is for moving furniture. All right. This shouldn't even be there. I don't know how that got there, but I just deleted it. So we're basically done. I'm going to show you how to do, or we'll run a macro on siding. All right. So again, I go here. I highlight the elevation I want. And now we have our kind of our, would be our most common siding numbers. And if you let's say that it's not high grade, let's say it's standard grade. There'd be a couple ways to do this. I could go in, I could click here. I know, for example, if I just delete the plus, that's standard. All right, but if we click here and I do a search, siding, vinyl, I see all the items. Right here it is. Here was high grade, there's premium grade. I either can double click on this or I can just hit OK. All right, and say it's 237 square feet. Unlike Symbility, you can't highlight several that are the same. You have to do it one at a time. All right, I can't highlight these and then click and enter if they're all going to be the same. You've got to do it one at a time. This one's a different kind of siding. Just I put several in. The house wraps. I'm sorry, I'm going to get rid of that. Oops. By the way, you may ask, what if I want to know what's in the siding? All right, what's part of it? You go up here and click for detail. By the way, you can have tags. You can see the unit price. All right, how that's broken down or how much that's going to extend out to. That's that number here. All right, and here's with O&P. We don't worry about depreciation, but again, back to one we'll use by far the most will be the item image. Click for detail, and this tells you what's in it. It includes starter strip, the undersill trim, J trim or J channel and F channel, inside and outside corner post, staples, and installation labor. So unlike Symbility, that has only siding in the line item, Xactimate bundles in quite a bit of stuff into the siding. So we know house wrap is 237. This may or may not have some fan fold insulation. Let's say it doesn't. It does have a gable. We're doing one of the gable ends. And then here's some frequent detach and reset line items. So let's say there's a light. Vinyl J-vent is like we got here. So it's some kind of outlet or light fixture. Any of them that's already got the J channel around it. All right. We would enter that, okay? So let's say there's 3 of those. Now let's say this light fixture was just mounted right to the siding and didn't have any of the J channel already set up. Same thing down here for these if they happen. But let's click on some ones that didn't. Meter base, same thing. It could have J channel, and in that case, we wouldn't have the detach or reset. This is usually almost always on one wall of the house. Usually I've never seen it on the front. I'm sure that could happen, but usually it's on the rear or one of the sides. All right. House numbers or letters, that's the address, almost always on the front. And if there's some stuff necessarily we can't account for, say there's a fence that butts up right against the wall that's got to be worked around, or the bushes are right up against the wall, going to have to be worked around. If there's a deck that covers the bottom two rows of siding, for example, we might put in anywhere from 1 to 10 hours. All right, we put in something. It can always end up being debated. I'm going to err on the high side. Now, here's something else that's maybe a little trick that'll save you time. We know now, based on the type of siding, that we're going to see these two line items. And by the way, there we go, I got them together on every one. So I highlight them and I drag it. Oops, I'm sorry, that's Symbility. So I'm going to hit Control C, and then I'm going to highlight right. You got to make sure it's highlighted. All right, Control V. Now, I still have to go in and change the quantities, okay? But I don't have to look up or see what line items. I may not have to run the whole macro, all right? So I go in and I probably now, since I've got an exterior trade, I'm going to have to set up debris removal. Debris removal is part of demolition. Let's say we knew that. I could actually hit DMO, all right? Or I can go in and search. These are the categories, demo, and it finds it for me. I hit OK. Let's say all I knew was, I had no idea what the category is, but I knew I needed a dumpster. So I click here, all right, and I go down to items. Dumpster is not a category, it's an item. So if I need to search for an item, I don't click on categories, I click on items. Now I start typing in, and there we go. We got various dumpsters, all right? Or let's say that's a tandem axle dump trailer, which for small to medium loads, for something like siding, unless we do a whole house, we might use that. So I click on it, quantities 1, and there we go. So I think I've run you through and caught most of the primary things that you would do in Xactimate. If we want to add photos, we would go to Photos and see here, Load Images. And then this would take us to the Windows Explorer. We find wherever you're storing your photos. Okay, you're not going to be able to get them right from Company Cam. You would have created a folder for that customer, and then when you were using Snagit to prep your photos, you'd look in there. So let's say we're just going to use this photo. We highlight it, click Open, and then put as many of these as what you prepped or are appropriate. All right. Now we go to Documents. The only one you need to worry about is Reports. Click Reports. First thing I always do, just so I don't forget, is resequence the order of the line item numbers. Symbility does that automatically. Xactimate, you have to do it. I always preview the estimate. I go through and I make sure that I got the right operator, the client address is correct. Okay, here was the claim number. Okay, and now let's look at our items, make sure we didn't miss anything. So you can see how the notes that we put in, the called F9 notes, are applied. All right, I see I missed one here. And what I would do in this case, I'll go ahead and look. I'll remember that I messed this note. I didn't complete this note. I just want to check to make sure that everything else is okay. And I'm doing an estimate for someone. I'm going to probably look if this number is not bigger than the scope of loss, then I probably got to start looking at why. Maybe the pricing in September went down. That has happened. Okay. And then here's my photo. So I'm going to get rid of this. Okay. I'm going to go back, go to estimate items. I'm going to find the roof where I saw I made a mistake. And what I did is my mistake was in my F9 note. I've kind of set it up where it only needs a minor amount of tweaking. So I enter 8%, and I default into Restoration AI, but let's just say we used Eagle View. I'll highlight that and then enter Eagle View waste calculation. But now I don't have to type all this other stuff. That stays the same. The only thing I'm doing is this edit right here, and you need to do that on every every estimate has a waste. We're explaining where our waste came from. Okay, so we're good to go. We'll come back to documents. Oh, all right, let's say that we looked at it, and the place I check are some of the biggest items, but let's say I looked at the laminated shingles, and on the scope of loss, it was $316. All right, let me see if I can find, well, that doesn't help, that's Symbility. Bear with me here, I'm going to find a Xactimate. All right, this was our estimate. What we want to find out is what price list the insurance used if their price is higher. I look right here, price list, that's Texas. I know that's Houston, and I know that they used July of 23. And I'm like, okay, so that's a higher price list. So how do I reprice this estimate? I go back to claim info. I go to parameters, and right here I click over on this buttons, and I go request price list. All right, the zip code should be the same, but check. Now I click here and I go back to, oops, July. Doesn't matter when in July, I click something right in the middle. Okay, contractor, and download. And then I hit next, 7%, and it asks me if I want to reprice, and the answer is yes. All right, the default settings should be good. I hit OK, and sure enough, price did go down since July. So I hit OK, and now I've actually increase my customer's price by $2,000. Now here's the deal. Either we're going to do it in the current month or in the month that it was priced at. If that was priced in June of 22, I can't go pick like July of 23 if I'm doing the estimate in September. I've got to use one or the other, okay? So I use the one the insurance used. They can't complain about that. Okay, now let's go back to documents, reports, just to make sure I resequence again. Export PDF file. I find the folder that I was going to use. All right, and then I click, whatever, save. I don't want to do that. I'm just going to do it on the desktop. I usually let the default alone. And then when I'm done, I've got to find this over on my desktop. I don't have to find, but I would check it. So that's basically how you create an Xactimate estimate. When you're done, you would send that to me with the waste report you created and the one-click code that you created, so I can check it and send it along to the homeowner. All right, once you're sure you're done, you've checked your final print, you hit save and exit. Ask if you want to save changes. Yes. All right, now we have that estimate here in Xactimate. You're ready for your next project. Okay? I hope